Welcome to Let's Talk Writing with Kirsten and Edwina,
coming to you from Madangi country
in Babinda, Far North Queensland, Australia. Today we're going to talk about narrative drive. How do you get it and what is it? How do you get your readers to keep turning the pages?
Yeah, so we writers are evil people. We want to keep people up at night and we want to make them cry as well. Maybe laugh as well, but mainly cry. So what is narrative drive? It is that compelling force that keeps people up and keeps them turning the pages. But how do we create that in our stories? So it's a combination of a few different things, but the main thing is that you have a central quest or question that runs throughout your whole story or novel or memoir. So once you have that central quest or question, you move the reader between hope and fear. So this is one of the best things I've ever learned in writing. I learned it from a screenwriting workshop with Duncan Thompson. It is suspense equals hope plus fear. So we are manipulating reader emotions.
Yes.
So for example...
We're evil people.
Yeah. So, for example, with your memoir, what do you think is the central quest or question there?
Well, in my memoir, at 43 years of age, I fall in love with a flamboyant Italian man. And the question is, how will it turn out? Obviously, the reader hopes it'll be all great. However, we know from the very beginning that there's lots of obstacles, health obstacles in the beginning. And so the fear is, what will happen? Will he survive? He becomes terminally ill. And how will she cope?
Yes, so it's about, how will this man influence Kirsten's life?
Yes.
And we hope that it'll be great and they'll
A
go
fairy
off
tale.
on this, a fairy tale, and they'll travel around the world and live happily ever after. And we fear, and you've set it up very well in the opening, that perhaps that isn't going to be the case. But so when you are writing, so don't worry about it too much in your first draft, but you're always thinking of, okay, is this leading us towards hope? So we're thinking, oh, what a lovely wedding, and, they're really happy, and they're making this great plan, and they've got this great job, and it looks like it's going really well, and then we'll get the other side. So moving the reader from, yes, going really great, they've got this wonderful plan, they'll be travelling around the world, to then, boom, melanoma.
Yes.
And then we know, things may not be going too well. And then hope, but they're still so loving and kind. And then a little hint, your husband's been flirting with me.
Alarm bells ringing.
Yes, moving between hope and fear. So with Thrill Seekers, which is based on real life, but I've fictionalised it because it's the chicken's way out of memoir. So if you want to write from real life, but you don't want to expose yourself or family, you can do it as fiction. So in this one, it is whether the older brother will be able to protect and look after his younger brother after the death of the father. And we hope that he'll be able to step up to the plate even though he's only 13. But our fear is that no, he won't be able to do it, that things are. So we're always moving between those two. So some writers, every time you read a book, have a look for how that's working. Every time you watch a movie, it's in there as well. We're manipulating between the hope and the fear. Another good trick is finish your scenes early.
Yes, and also get in late. So you don't give us all the backstory. You go straight to the moment, the juice, the heartstring moment. So you mentioned suspense and, what was it? Suspense and fear.
Suspense equals hope plus fear.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I learned, because you just mentioned suspense, I learned a lot from Dan Brown, of all writers, because my memoir is nothing like a Dan Brown book. However, he talks about the 3 C's: crucible, clock, and contract. So the crucible is that you're constantly putting your protagonist into difficult situations, having to choose one way or another in moments between fear and hope. The clock is, of course, the ticking clock. So that
Time limits.
Time limits. And in my book, it was relatively easy to achieve that because we're dealing with a terminally ill person. And the last C is contract. The contract with the reader, and this is what you started out with. Your question. We want that. We as a reader, we keep you up at night because we promise you we will actually answer your question. If you keep turning the page, you will get the answer. So you have to establish that contract with the reader that there's a question at the beginning of your story, and you will, as the author, give the reader the answer by the end of the book.
Yes, they're great C words. I'd add I've got the whole character method of story creation is based on C's. But another C I would add to that is conflict.
Yes, and that's what I meant by crucible. That is actually conflict.
Well, that's a term that I learned through Saul Stein's writing, which I would highly recommend people getting onto Saul Stein's works as well. The crucible situation is a pressure cooker.
Yes.
You put them in difficult situations. Exactly. So you have a couple who are on the verge of breaking up and you put them on an 18-hour flight sitting next to each other.
Great.
Yeah. Or at a Christmas party or at the funeral of one of their mothers or something that's just going to increase the pressure and that keeps us going as well. But conflict does not have to be, people often misunderstand conflict. It does not have to be sword fighting or being chased by a crazy albino monk.
It can be as simple as, I want to stay in tonight, and the wife says, no, let's go out and have a pizza. And you have a little conflict. As simple as that.
And even objects, settings, so especially in fiction, a really good example of somebody who writes conflict in every scene well is the guy who wrote Manchester by the Sea. It's a very harrowing film, but he uses conflict through setting very well. So the house is on fire, the guy comes home, the father, to see ambulances, his house on fire, and his wife being put into the ambulance. And that's a traumatic moment enough.
Yes.
But the trolley won't work properly. And every time she goes, she's being jerked and jolted as she's being put in, and they can't get her in. Or they go to open a door and it doesn't open. So even just those little things. Yeah, okay, the wife says, okay, well, we'll go out, even though I want to stay home. But they step out the door and there's a huge downpour and they haven't got their umbrellas.
Yeah.
So just thinking of where you can add conflict. Every dialogue should be in some way adversarial.
Yes, especially when you start writing, we often have the tendency in dialogue to just say, how are you? You know, all those things we do say. Well, you don't want that. The dialogue actually should be a form of conflict, a form of disagreement. Yes. And that makes for interesting conflict, or dialogue rather. So I was also thinking it's, of course, created through cause and effect. So every scene you put needs to lead on and build the story, because in my experience, I used to be a travel writer, so I used to spend a lot of time setting up the scene, beautiful sunset, beautiful interiors of wherever we are, and so on. Actually, your reader gets bored with that. You should only have maybe 20% of that setting the scene.
Yes.
And then you really want to take us into the story. Yes.
Yes. So that's the thing too about cutting to the chase. Get to the exciting bit. We don't care what the waitress says. We don't care what you order out for lunch. Yeah. We care about the poison that's gone into the meal.
So let's see what is a good writing prompt to get our listeners to start writing their suspenseful masterpieces.
Well, think about your story. What is the central quest or question? So it could be, will Sophie find the child she gave up for adoption in the 60s? So we hope that, of course, she will, and that they will have a loving reunion. But we fear that she will never find the child, or that if they do, it won't turn out so well. So this can work for a short story or a full-length work, for your memoir, for a novel, and even each scene will have its own little quest or question in there. So what is the central quest or question of your story?
Yes, and if you're writing a memoir, what is the central trauma or difficult moment that you went through? And write again and again. So write it many, many times, because that question might even change. So
yeah, What is this story about?
What is your story about?
Yeah.
And ask you that yourself that again and again.
Yes. Good luck.
Good luck and good writing.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Writing with Kirsten and Edwina.
And here are our links. Please follow us and leave comments. Happy writing.
Just throw that.